You're listening to the Bloomberg Sound On podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 1 Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, and the Bloomberg Business app. Or listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts.
It lasted all of 20 minutes. A big surrender yesterday in Atlanta. Donald J. Trump, prisoner number P011358809 in the Fulton County Jail. Pretty remarkable to see it happen, even though we knew it was all going to happen. As I read from the terminal, shortly after he entered the facility, his name appeared in its database, recording his height as 6'3", apparently self-reported, and weight of 215 pounds. Not bad. Hair color as blonde or strawberry, and assigned an inmate number. Donald Trump spoke to reporters on the tarmac as he got back to the airport following his arrest.
When you have that great freedom to challenge, you have to be able to, otherwise you're going to have very dishonest elections. What has taken place here is a travesty of justice. We did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong.
And he did an interview later on Newsmax talking about the whole experience, even as the mugshot was turned into merchandise. And you saw this coming. They were selling fake versions of the mugshot at one point. Indeed, the Trump Save America Joint Fundraising Committee out with T-shirts, mugs, beverage coolers, bumper stickers, and other merchandise. $12 for the bumper sticker, up to $36. That's the premium long-sleeve T-shirt. Former president asked on Newsmax a couple hours after. I guess he got home by the time he did the interview, because they sure waited around for a while. What was it like in jail, Mr. President?
Terrible experience. I came in, I was treated very nicely, but it is what it is. I took a mugshot, which I never heard the words mugshot. Didn't teach me that at the Wharton School of Finance.
I'm thinking he did know about the mugshot. Didn't Rudy tell him? So we have a couple of voices to help us understand what's going on here. It's Eric Larson, of course, Bloomberg legal reporter. We're going to talk next as well with the state attorney for Palm Beach County, Mr. Dave Aronberg. Eric joins us from World Headquarters in New York. Eric Larson, great to have you back. Not a lot really happened yesterday. It was a 20-minute affair. But to actually see the mugshot, to see the expression on his face, to watch it all happen in what, by the way, is not a very nice jail, was quite remarkable. What do you think the experience was like for him when we couldn't see inside?
I'd say it was probably a bit humbling for Mr. Trump, probably like it is for anyone who's going into a jail to be booked, but probably more so for him. He wasn't booked quite like that and didn't have his mugshot taken in the 3 other criminal cases that he's facing, of course, and this was his first time. And there was also, of course, a question about whether or not he even would have a mugshot taken. I'm sure that his lawyers probably tried pretty hard to negotiate that away, but it didn't happen. And, of course, we see from the expression on his face, he was looking pretty stern and defiant, and I think he's doing his best to use the image to his advantage, but I'm sure it was pretty humbling.
We should note, Eric, the deadline is passed. Everyone did surrender, correct?
That is correct. All 19 defendants in the case have now surrendered. They've been booked. One individual, Harrison Floyd, he's the former director of Black Voices for Trump, did not reach a bond and is currently in custody. So we'll see what happens with that. But everyone else was able to get a bond agreement and was able to leave the jail after their booking.
So the surrender date, August 24 here. We do not have an arraignment date set, apparently. How's that going to work?
We don't know. We don't have any dates yet other than the one that Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis gave when she said that she envisions the arraignments happening the week of September 5th, which is a Tuesday after a holiday. Theoretically, she could be planning for all of them to happen that week, or that could just be the start of arraignments happening. We're not exactly sure, but that's the big question. When will these arraignments happen? When will especially Mr. Trump appear in court in Atlanta to enter his plea, presumably of not guilty?
They do them differently in Georgia, right, in Fulton County, because we've seen him showing up for arraignments. In this case, they had him go to the jail. Is that what would have happened to anybody else?
Yeah, he was treated just like everyone else in Fulton County, as far as we can tell. In other cases in New York, in Washington, federal court, in Florida, in federal court, he was able to sort of go in and do a fingerprinting and be formally sort of booked at the court just before his arraignment. So didn't work out for him that way quite here. So as much as yesterday was a circus with this 20 minutes in jail, it's going to be even more so when he actually arrives in court to go before a judge and enter his plea. And I think it's going to be a much more significant day.
You better believe it. Eric, thank you so much for all of your great reporting and analysis here throughout the process. We actually got 4 of them done with Eric Larson. And I would argue we got 4 done with Dave Aronberg. He's back with us now, state attorney for Palm Beach County. Dave, it's great to see you. Always a pleasure to talk. I'm wondering your thoughts. I don't know if you've ever been in the Fulton County Jail. For your sake, I hope not, because I'm told as I read here, this is not a very nice place. It stinks. It's probably not very clean. Former president walks in there with the shiny shoes and the suit on. I don't know what he was planning to do in that mugshot, but he sure didn't look happy about what was going on.
He did not. Joe, good to be back with you. By the way, I'm also 6'3", 215, and my other
I knew that.
Right, my other car is a Lamborghini. So the one you don't see me drive. I wasn't totally surprised that he took the mugshot, that he was forced to, but keep in mind it was optional, really. The sheriff has a discretion, and the sheriff could have just said, we're not doing it, just like it was waived in the other jurisdictions. And the reason why he didn't need to take one is because mugshot is really used to, in case you go on the lam, in case you become a fugitive and they need to identify you. But when you're the most famous / infamous person in the world, there's really no need to have the mugshot. So, I thought it was interesting that he took one. I'm not surprised he only spent 20 minutes in that rat-infested jail. Perhaps this will be an impetus for authorities to look at that place a little more closely. It's supposed to be one of the worst in the country.
Yeah, he had to have practiced the mugshot, right? He was doing that in the mirror. He knew exactly what that was going to look like. Am I wrong?
Well, I thought going in, he was going to do the Tom DeLay thing. Remember Tom DeLay's mugshot, which is he had a big smile, right? He wore his congressional pin. It looked like his congressional headshot, but it's his mugshot. Now, I do agree. I think this was rehearsed in practice. I was surprised he went with the menacing look. He and Rudy Giuliani. Yeah, but it wasn't the worst of all of them. I thought it was pretty bad, but I thought the worst was John Eastman, and even worse perhaps was Sidney Powell. Did you see hers?
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, that one looked a little bit like the movie poster for A Clockwork Orange, Malcolm McDowell. Did you remember that? Are you old enough?
I am. Yes, I am. I would not have gone there, but that's why we bring in Dave Aronberg for these beautiful analogies. By the way, if you haven't seen the Batman bad guy mock-up, they've put this together on social media. They made Rudy into the Penguin. It's just remarkable, this world of social media we live in. Where would we do this otherwise? But Dave, what happens next? They're going to have an arraignment, as we were discussing with Eric Larson. So he's going to be back there in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so in Georgia, just like in Florida, you have the first appearance and then you come back for the arraignment. We saw them both combined in the federal cases. But yeah, I do think it'll be a bigger deal when he comes in and he has to say not guilty. He will be pleading not guilty, and that should be televised. That's the benefit of this case in Georgia. Everything should be transparent and televised as compared to federal court and state court in New York, where it's not. And I really do think we need to come forward to the 21st century and start televising these things, because otherwise, with all the conspiracy theorists out there, there's just a made-up narrative, alternate facts, and you don't get the real scoop of what's going on. And it's so easy to put cameras in there. I mean, come on, we're not living in 1950s anymore. This is easy to do, and I think the federal courts and the state New York courts should get over themselves and just allow people to see behind the walls there.
You're here. Boy, there's a lot there, Dave, and I sure hope that would happen, although I don't have very high hopes. Georgia, yeah, the rest we'll see. But we've got business to take care of on Monday, and I wonder your thoughts on this move by Mark Meadows to move this to federal court. The U.S. District Judge in Atlanta will hear arguments over this on Monday. What's going to happen?
I think it's about a 20% chance he succeeds. Now, his chance of moving it to a federal court, which is called removal, is better than any other of the 19 defendants, because Mark Meadows was working for the government at the time he did this, and he was setting up meetings like his job entails. But the problem for Meadows is that the meetings he was setting up were not for Trump to be Trump as president. It was Trump as a candidate. It was trying to overturn the election. That's not under the color of the law, as they say. That's not a proper duty for the president or for the chief of staff. And in Fani Willis's indictment, in her 41-count indictment, she was pretty clear that Mark Meadows was doing things that were way beyond his proper role as chief of staff. He was going to other states, talking to state legislators about overturning the election. So I think it's unlikely he succeeds, but he definitely has the best chance of any of them to get it done. And even if it does succeed, keep in mind, it just means that there won't be cameras in the courtroom. It'll be a federal judge, a more conservative jury pool, but it will still be a state prosecution under state laws. And the conviction, if there is one, will be pardon proof. It cannot be pardoned by a president.
Fascinating stuff here. By the way, there's more on Monday. This really gives us a sense of what our future is like here for the next year. Judge Chutkan is going to hold her first hearing in the election interference case here in Washington, expected to announce a trial date and schedule. What's your thought there, Dave?
I think that's going to be the first trial to go. Judge Chutkan, yeah, she's like on a rocket docket. She is not putting up with any guff, and she's moving forward. And I expect that to be the first trial, and I think that will happen before the election. And if you twist my arm, I think the other trial before the election will be the New York trial, which is the weakest of the four cases surrounding Trump. I think the documents case, which I think is the strongest case of the four, won't happen until after the election. Same with the Fulton County case, the Cheeseboro/Chesboro case, that's being separated from the others, and that's going to happen in late October. So we'll see that. But as far as Trump, I don't think he gets put on trial for his RICO case in Georgia until after the election.
Wow. But that means that something happens before the election, because there does seem to be this growing belief, Dave, that none of these trials will begin until after we vote in 2024.
No, I think you'll have two criminal trials completed, and I think you will have the civil cases completed, which is the one in New York with the Attorney General, which is a civil case, not a criminal one. And then you have another trial in the E. Jean Carroll defamation case. So you're going to still have a bunch of things before the election, and the Republican primary voters will get to decide whether they want someone who has been convicted or acquitted or a hung jury to be their nominee by then. And it looks like they're all ready to support someone, even if he's convicted. I mean, even his opponents would support him if he's convicted. So there's that.
So when does flipper season begin, Dave? You look at all of those mugshots, 18 co-defendants. I know it's not going to be Rudy Giuliani, but when are we talking about somebody who cuts a deal?
Sooner than later. The reason why Fani Willis, my counterpart there in Fulton County, indicted 19 people was she was hoping that some of them are going to flip early on. I don't think it's possible to have a trial of all 19 at the same time unless you do it in the Atlanta Hawks arena. And so I think that she will get a bunch to flip. There's an adage, first in, first to win. The first one through the prosecutor's door gets the best deal. And then she'll use them as key witnesses against the others. So, hey, business is open. I think you'll start to see people start going through her door because time's a wasting.
That's going to be a big day when that happens. In the meantime, you look at a day like Monday, and you just get a sense of how crowded the schedule is going to be. How busy is Donald Trump's legal team going to be as it tries to address 4 trials, 4 cases, actually even more than that at once? Or are they going to be separate legal teams for the duration?
I think he is separating them up a bit. He has the criminal team. He's got civil, and then there's 4 different criminal cases. I mean, I don't know anyone who's ever faced this kind of legal threat, civil and criminal. And of course, at the same time, he's running for this important position of president. So I don't know how he does it all, but he's going to do it. And I think it just means that it's going to be so much harder for him to prevail in a general election. Yes, this stuff helps him in a primary. His base loves it. I mean, nothing fuels the MAGA movement than martyrdom and grievance. But that doesn't work in a general election. You got all these suburban moms out there who are looking at this like, hey, this is nuts. And so I don't think this is going to go well for him in the end politically. And I think he will be found guilty of at least some of these charges, like over 90 of them if you combine the 4 cases.
Amazing. And always a great conversation with Dave Aronberg. We learn something every time we talk, the state attorney for Palm Beach County. Dave, great to have you back, and thank you.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Sound On podcast. Catch the program live weekdays at 1 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the TuneIn app, Bloomberg.com, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
A lot of people still stuck on 6'3", 215 pounds. I guess strawberry or blonde is how you would describe the hair, right? Front page of the New York Post today. Pretty remarkable. No headline, just the mugshot. As we assemble our panel here on a Friday, Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino are with us here, of course, Bloomberg Politics contributors. Happy Friday to both of you. It's not the first time we've had an event like this where we knew exactly what was going to happen. There were no surprises, yet it was still remarkable to watch because of the historical significance here. Jeanne, I guess self-reporting your height and your weight, though, is a pretty good thing for Donald Trump. I guess it could have gone worse at the jail yesterday, huh?
That's right. And, I personally am in favor of all self-reporting of height and weight. So I have to back him on that one. I, too, am a strawberry blonde. It was, you look at that picture and somebody described it looked like he was going to headbutt somebody. It looks menacing, glowering. It is quite remarkable. And it's hard to argue with people who say out of all the billions of pictures taken of Donald Trump over the years, this is the one that will sustain beyond the campaign and the mugs and the T-shirts. It is quite stark reminder of this chaotic presidency, this chaotic post-presidency, and where we are in America today in a very sad way.
Well, what do you think, Rick? Somebody talked to him, I'm assuming, about the way he would do this. He clearly was mugging, if you will, in the mirror before the shot. Would you have told your candidate to smile?
God, I hope I'm never in the position to advise a candidate who's getting indicted to do anything. That's just actually just the question's shocking.
We actually found something that Rick Davis hasn't done, everyone.
Yeah, I mean, just nuts. This is a face he's used before, right? I mean, this is his scowl. I saw a Maggie Haberman interview who watches Donald Trump closer than anybody I know. And she's like, yeah, he practices that all the time. I've seen it throughout the years. This is sort of a catch, look for Donald Trump. So it's nothing new. And I'm sure a lot of it is like, what do I want on the T-shirt at the end of the day? Because that's the way he thinks, right? What am I going to make out of this? Yeah. So, I think the whole thing was just sort of a circus in the sense that, he knew what was going to happen. Everybody else knew what was going to happen. And there was actually no surprises. I mean, I don't think anything happened that anybody's actually waking up today saying, wow, I'm surprised by that.
To see the prisoner number, to see the mugshot, although that is the old Apprentice look, right? We used to see it every night. And certainly he has been honing that look for a long time. It's going to help him raise money, Jeanne. We're already looking. You knew this was coming. The merchandising has already begun here. And we're going, I guess, from $12 for the bumper sticker to $36 for the long sleeve T-shirt. I'm sure you'll have the crop tops and so forth. Is this actually going to make money for him?
Yeah, don't talk about crop tops, Joe. It is going to make money that he desperately needs because, of course, his legal bills are enormous. And it's not just his legal bills. It's his, co-conspirators, it's witnesses, it's others. So he desperately needs that money. And Joe, I know you've been paying close attention to Truth Social, but of course, last night he went on X for the first time in a long time and posted that mugshot all the way down from New Jersey. He was reminding people that he's going to be arrested, which is not quite accurate, when he got down to Georgia. So they understand the need to make as much money as they can off of this, and they're going to be pushing for it. I think it's, making lemonade out of lemons, I guess, is what he's trying to do.
Mm-hmm. The former president did hold an interview. You might have heard me mention this at the beginning of the hour. One on Newsmax, called in very late, but got on there to talk about what kind of a day he had.
You know, I went through an experience today that I never thought I'd have to go through, but yet I've gone through the same experience 3 other times. In my whole life, I didn't know anything about indictment, and now I've been indicted like 4 times.
When he was asked again about how all of this went yesterday inside the Fulton County Jail, he said it was terrible, but he was treated very well. That image is likely to become a touchstone of the campaign. It already is, and based on what we were just discussing with Rick and Jeanne, it could be a moneymaker. There's a new poll out as well today that I want to mention. Politico magazine getting together with Ipsos. Does everyone have a poll? I guess so at this point, showing this is a remarkable number and something I was hoping to ask Rick and Jeanne about. Roughly 60% of Americans think the cases against Donald Trump on the mishandling of classified documents and attempting to overturn the election results, those 2 cases, should go to trial before the election. And we know that Fani Willis wants to get this done starting in October, which is probably not likely. But if you just listen to Dave Aronberg, he actually thinks at least 2 of these trials could be complete by the time we get to the election. We'll have more on some of the other elements of this poll this day after Donald Trump turned himself in to be booked on criminal charges over his efforts, again, allegedly to overturn the election results. Rick Davis is back with us here. Rick, I was trying to put the pieces together on what's going to be an incredibly busy Monday. We've got hearings in 2 different cities, 2 different cases. This is the very scenario that you were talking about that's going to be very difficult for this campaign to manage in the throes of a presidential campaign effort. There could be days where we have 4 hearings at once. How do you map all of that out? How do you prepare to address all of this at once while remaining in front of the voters?
Yeah, no, this is like a campaign manager's worst nightmare. Not only is your candidate taken out of the political domain and put into a courtroom, or in this case, that you have to devote resources of your campaign, money and people to dealing with these issues. But think about all the preparatory work that has to be done with the candidate's time. So, you usually, moan and groan over debates. Oh, you got to, an hour a day for a week. We got to debate prep. You imagine the enormous amount of time it takes for these lawyers to sit down with Donald Trump, who is a micromanager in the worst day, right? I mean, like, he's not going to let these guys say one thing in court that he isn't approved, which means hours and hours a day of legal phone calls and Zooms where the candidate himself has to be so distracted that he's got to focus on his own legal problems. And that will affect his performance on the stump. He'll go out into a big rally, and all he's going to want to do is talk about his trials, because that's all he's talked about all day long. I mean, it's going to be a nightmare for the campaign staff.
How do you do it, Jeanne? Also back with us, Jeanne Zaino. How do you even plan a week around all of these court dates? I mean, we're going to be talking more about the court dates than what he's doing as a presidential candidate.
That's right. And I feel badly for his campaign staff. It is mind-boggling to imagine any individual having the wherewithal, the energy to devote to one of these trials, let alone trying to run for president again. It's mind-numbing to think about. I don't know how you plan for it, but I do agree with Rick. We're going to hear an awful lot those times he does get on the campaign trail about these trials. And of course, the loser in all of this is the American public. And I think also the Republican Party, because this just devastates their chances in so many avenues, and not just at the top of the ticket, but think about the U.S. Senate, where they really should pick up in 24. They are at risk now in the House, and as we go down ballot. So it's a disaster for the Republican Party, I think, if this continues at the rate it is, and what we saw last night with the circus following him to Atlanta and back.
Well, it's going to be a circus for the next year, at least, probably longer. And thank God we've got Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino to help us survive all of it, because we're going to need some serious analysis along the way. And you can count on that here. They're back with more next, because we haven't heard much from President Biden. He's still on vacation at Lake Tahoe, even as the administration gets together with others in the financial community, including, of course, the Federal Reserve in Jackson Hole, to talk Bidenomics, inflation, and that's all coming up next.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Sound On podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 1 Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, and the Bloomberg Business app. Or listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts.
Ryan Teague Beckwith, who just stopped by, Bloomberg Politics reporter. I won't kill you with the economics here, but it's obviously a pretty big deal on the campaign trail. We heard a lot about the economy from Republican candidates on the debate stage the other night. Joe Biden's trying like heck to sell Bidenomics. Is the Fed going to make this impossible for him, or will the Fed enable him by orchestrating a soft landing, I guess is the question.
You know, it's interesting. I looked into this a while ago, and the research shows that unemployment obviously hurts a politician who's running for a re-election somewhat. Like, you know, you can see people lose re-election because unemployment was too high.
Yeah.
But inflation is way worse. People really get mad at incumbents when inflation is bad. So I think, you know, even though that dual mandate makes it a little tricky when you're trying to fight inflation and keep them, you know, unemployment and sort of manage both of those, I think it's really in his best interest that they do whatever it takes to get inflation down. And if real wages are growing at the same time, which they keep bragging about, and we've seen in some of the recent numbers, but we haven't seen in the polling numbers, then, but you know, if by this time next year people start to feel that their dollar is going further, then that should help him with his reelection.
So Lester's Master's line, easy for me to say, is exactly what the administration wants.
Theoretically, though, I've had many conversations with people who say the credit that you get when the economy is doing well is actually far less than the blame you will get when it is not. So even if we see an improvement in the economy, it might not actually register in the minds of voters to the extent that dissatisfaction with the economy does. So obviously this is something that I'm sure we can expect Republicans to continue beating on the campaign trail, talking about Bidenomics and the current president. But while we were focused on, you know, that and Jackson Hole today, we were focused on the former president and Fulton County yesterday.
You said it.
We got the mugshot, Ryan. Is it working for him?
If you remember, there was a photo where Angela Merkel was like, you know, trying to convince Trump of something, and he's sitting at a desk with his arms crossed. And that photo to me just encapsulated everything about Trump, because if you hated Trump, that just summed it up. Look, there's like all of Europe basically yelling at Trump, and he's recalcitrant, right?
Yes.
And if you like Trump, that photo summarized everything you liked about Trump. Look, here's all of Europe yelling at Trump, and he's recalcitrant, right? So I think that the mugshot is the same way. Like, it's just it's a Rorschach. It's like a national Rorschach. You look at this and you either think, look at this guy, or you look at it and you go, oh, look at this guy, right? Like, there's no in between, and I don't think that it helps him or hurts him. Obviously, his campaign is selling merchandise with it on it, and he's not alone in that. Rick Perry was arrested and had a mugshot, and had his campaign put out T-shirts with his mugshot on one side, and a DUI that the DA who had authorized the charges against him on the other side of it.
He blazed the trail.
Yeah, I mean, and actually, really blazing the trail, Eugene V. Debs, who ran for president as a socialist in 1920 from prison, had campaign buttons, showing what was essentially a mugshot for him and his inmate number on it.
I just wonder which one Trump had in his mind. There's the famous Frank Sinatra mugshot. You can buy posters of that anywhere. There's also the John Gotti mugshot, and he owned that with a big grin. And a lot of folks thought Donald Trump might do the same thing. I wonder if he did, in fact, plan for that, if he was practicing that in the mirror, or if he had such a bad time in that stinky jail that he was actually really angry.
No, I think that he wanted the stern look. You know, prosecutors have said it's very risky to smile in a mugshot because
Is that right?
it can send the message that you don't take the charge seriously, and juries may punish you for that. I know that two of the people who were his also indicted in Georgia, two of them were smiling in it. One of them is the former head of the state GOP, who then made that his Twitter profile pic, his mugshot, and he was smiling. Right. And so those folks are definitely doing that. Jenna Ellis, the other. that can make a jury mad at you if they think that you just think this is all a joke, and especially damaging for people like pulled over for a DUI. That's part of the other thing here. Sure. Most mugshots are not. You don't get the chance to show up. You get pulled over because you were drinking and driving, and you know the James Brown mugshot. It's usually the worst.
I thought you'd go for
day
Nick Nolte, but
of
I'll
your
go
life,
for James
or Nick
Brown.
Nolte.
Yeah.
It's the worst day of your life, and you don't look good in it. And so the fact that he's allowed to sort of pick out the outfit and put on the flag pin and those kinds of things and show up at it when he wants, I think this is a much more of a staged photo than your typical mugshot.
Well, and Fonnie Willis kind of said that when Mark Meadows was fighting the deadline of today at noon, when he didn't want to have to show up, then she said, I've been very generous in her response that we had 2 full weeks for you guys to show up.
Yeah, right.
And kind of speaks to your exact point, Ryan. Just quickly, you said that you don't think the mugshot really like moves the needle for the president in any way. Did anyone really move the needle this week? Because of course that wasn't the only event. We got the debate behind us as well.
We had the debate, and it was a weird debate because Trump was sort of a spectral presence at it. It was more of a seance, really, to see if they could sort of bring his spirit into the room. And he did come knocking a few times, but it really was odd for how much of the debate didn't focus on Trump, considering that he's ahead by 40 points, and how there were a couple of candidates who were willing to get in their digs at him, Asa Hutchinson, Chris Christie, obviously, Mike Pence to some extent. But really a lot more, I thought, a lot more potential there for Vivek Ramaswamy, who has so little name recognition. He had a lot more to go.
Yeah, he seems to be on the ascent. We'll see how long that lasts and who gets on the debate stage also in September.
27th.
We really need to rest up for September, I feel like has been the theme of this hour, Kaylee. Ryan Teague Beckwith, always a great pleasure. Thank you, sir. Bloomberg Politics reporter. Find him on the terminal here in Washington. This is Bloomberg.
Thanks for listening to the Sound On podcast. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already at Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. And you can find us live every weekday from Washington, D.C. at 1 p.m. Eastern Time at Bloomberg.com.